Inflation, inflation, inflation. We hear so much about inflation. Is it ruining your financial life?
Brian, I am excited about this because we've had a lot of conversations recently with folks, whether it be team members or clients or fans of the show, that are like, oh man, this inflation, it's getting me, it's getting me, it's getting me, it's getting me. But we said, okay, yeah, we know that something's going on with inflation, but is that really the problem, or is there something else afoot going on here?
Yeah, I'm worried people aren't going to like our answer because we're going to look. This is one I love that we get to share some good news about inflation.
Yep.
We get to talk about, look, inflation's real. We're going to show you, we're going to separate out what are the actual numbers of what's happening with inflation, but then we're going to go a step further and actually tell you what can you control, because you do need to be disciplined. You need to make sure that you're making good financial decisions.
Because look, we know that over the last 2 years, inflation has been a significant deal. If you look at inflation from January of 2020 all the way through the middle of 2023, it's been a wild ride, reaching almost as high as a 9% increase in the price of goods year over year. However, it has settled down some as we've moved into 2023, that right now, current inflation levels are measuring at about a 3% change in what they were last year. So they have subsided a touch, but it's been a wild ride, and it's been something that I think have been felt by most consumers in this country.
Well, not even just consumers, it's also investors. I mean, talk about how much time we spend. I feel like it's like, when you go to the grocery store and you see all the tabloids with everything. Now, and if you're in the financial world, you spend all your time hyper-focusing on what is the Federal Reserve going to do. So inflation, as you said, has dominated the last 2 years, but we think it goes beyond that. Yes, the numbers have been bad, but we think it goes much more beyond that. We know so much of personal finance is your behavior.
That's right.
How are you in doing things? What decisions are you making? It's all incremental decisions that stack up upon themselves and lead to where you're going financially.
Yeah, the fact is there's a lot that is in your control. There's a lot that you are able to impact even in an inflationary environment, even in a place where things are getting more expensive. So we're going to break those down. What are the things that you can control, and what are the things that you cannot control, and how do you navigate that well across the common areas in our lives where we spend the majority of our money?
So we're talking about cars, homes, living expenses, base living expenses, and then even variable living expenses. Let's jump right in to the vehicles. Bo.
Yeah, so cars is interesting, right? We cannot control, this is not in your control, what happens with the price of automobiles. And again, talk about a volatile chart. Since 2015 all the way till now, the price of cars have gone up. We had all the supply chain issues that happened during COVID, and it caused both used car prices as well as new car prices to skyrocket. And while they have settled down some from their highs in 2021 and 2022, the price of cars is still up, and that's something that we cannot affect. It's not something we can change when it comes to impacting what we pay for automobiles on whole.
But let's talk about, that's what you can't control. Obviously, inflation has caused all prices to go up in vehicles, but we can control what type of vehicle or the manufacturer or how nice. Let's kind of jump into what we're talking about, because we're kind of known for the 23-8. And part of when we talk about 20% down, 3 years of financing, no more than 3 years, and then 8% of your income, a lot of what we're trying to capture is that 3 years, so you don't buy more than you can afford. And I think a lot of us have talked about cars are just so outrageously priced. We hear a lot of people talk about $30,000 cars, $40,000 cars. I was pleasantly surprised to see you can still buy really nice, reliable vehicles for around $20,000.
Yeah, Brian, you said it so interestingly. You said that in the start of your journey, when your journey's beginning, you really just need something that's reliable, something that is dependable. And so for most consumers, they think, okay, base level, entry level, beginning, bottom level, that's where I ought to start. However, the base level model is not equal across all brands. And here's what we mean. If you look at the entry level sedans of different types of automobile, a Toyota Corolla, MSRP, according to the Toyota website, comes in, just like you said, right around $22,000. Honda Civic, $24,000. those have become more expensive over time. As we've seen prices increase, those prices have increased. You can't control that. What you can control, though, is you say, you know what, hey, I listened to the Money Guy show. They said I just need a reliable car, entry level, base level. I'm going to go get a base level Mercedes. That's what I'm going to, a BM. I'm going to get the 3 Series, not the 5, not the 7. I'm going to get the 3 Series. What you don't realize is that decision can have huge impacts, because the Mercedes A-Class right now, MSRP is almost $34,000, and a BMW 3 Series is almost $44,000 for the entry-level model.
So this is the part where when I want to talk about when we give you 23.8, the bridge to help you navigate how do you have reliable transportation when you don't have a lot of jingle in your pocket. We're thinking more Civic and Corolla.
That's right.
It is definitely
exactly
not
right.
luxury vehicles. That is for when you get to step 8 of the financial order of operations. But here's the good news, because a lot of you are like, okay, I hear this 23.8 talked about all the time. I hear other content creators talking about it. Can you guys actually show me the numbers, help me navigate this? We have a great resource. If you go out to our website, moneyguy.com, I want you to go up to the search bar and just type in 23.8. We have a 23.8 hub that is going to help you. It's got a calculator. It's got resources. This is the type of stuff that's going to help you navigate the right decisions in your vehicle purchase.
And if you want something to take it even a step further, you can go out to moneyguy.com/resources, and you can buy our car buying checklist. So not only will the 23.8 calculator help you figure out how much you can afford, this car buying checklist will actually help you make sure you're making that decision as responsibly as possible. You cannot control how automobile prices increase through time, but you can control how you participate in that, the type of car that you buy and the way that you buy that car. And if you do that well, even you can overcome inflationary pressures in this type of environment.
So make sure you take advantage of both of those free resources, the car buying checklist as well as the 23.8 hub. I think you'll love the work we put into that, and it will also help you make better decisions. Now let's talk about, here's a big one, because we come out of the chute. Both vehicles are expensive, and they get you in a trap if you're not doing it right. The second thing is where you're going to live. Homes and housing is very expensive, and inflation has definitely been impactful there too.
Yeah, it's interesting. For most people, the single most expensive thing you will ever buy is a home. And for most people, the American dream is home ownership. We want to be in a home. We want to own our piece of land. However, if we look at home prices just over the last decade, they have increased precipitously. Specifically, since 2020, since COVID, we've seen a huge run up in the price of homes. Now, it has subsided a bit. It's down about 9% since last quarter, but home prices are still high. They're higher than they were a year ago, and that's higher than it was 2 years ago, and that's higher than it was 5 years ago. And unfortunately, you can't control what happens with the value of homes, but there are some things that are in your control when it comes to home buying.
Yeah, and by the way, we don't know if it's going to continue to go down, if it's going to go up, but we do know it's one of those things where you still have the ability to control, how much house you can afford to buy, where you buy the house, how far your commute, and so forth. All these things, whether you even buy versus just rent while you're trying to figure out what's going on in the decision. We've actually realized there's a lot of variables that people just need to sit down, do the homework, don't get in a hurry, because this is what a lot of what you need to do financially has you going through checklists and also going through and making sure you are thinking about this in a long-term mindset, not in the instinctive, just moment in time, what will make me feel good.
So we think when it comes to buying a home, there are some rules you can follow. The first, and you just kind of alluded to this, is your timeline. Do I believe that I can be in this home for at least 5 to 7 years? Home buying decisions are long-term decisions. You don't want to make that decision based on, okay, what is the next 6 months going to look like? What's the next 1 year going to look like? You want to make sure you give yourself enough time that even if you do buy at the top of the market, or even if you do buy when prices have appreciated, if you stretch out your timeline long enough, odds are you're going to be okay. The second thing you want to make sure is that when you're buying your first home, you don't necessarily have to put 20% down. On your first home, you get a little latitude. If you can only do 3%, 5%, 10%, that's okay, so that you can get on the home ownership side of the equation, so long as you do not run afoul of the third piece. You have to make sure you keep your housing costs less than 25% of your monthly gross income.
Now, with the Money Guy rule, we have taken something that's a pretty complex personal decision and boiled it down to really 3 simple things. But I know that there's a lot more. If you're going to actually do Foo for You, you need to probably go through a checklist to see how do you personalize this. And that's why I'd encourage you to go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have a completely free 8-part checklist that you can go through to see, hey, have I got all my ducks in a row when I'm making this big lifetime decision? Because it is one of those things, Bo, that housing, we don't know if it's going up. We don't know if it's going down.
Yep.
As we know, time will spread that out. So you need to be thinking, don't make a 1 to 2 year decision. Make a decision that's going to serve you well for the next decade. And I think the resources and free information we've shared is going to help you navigate that.
I love, Brian, that you've said this before. When it comes to making a housing decision, don't make it based on the market. Don't make it based on, prices are going to go up or interest rates might change or make the decision based on the need that you have and reasonably what you can afford. And if you follow those 2 metrics, it's much more likely you're going to set yourself up for success than get yourself into a house that you can't afford at a time that you should not be making that decision.
I do think interest rates will go down, likely even in the next year to 18 months. However, do not get yourself in a financial situation where the only way you can be successful is for interest rates to go down in the future. And I think there's a lot of people right now trying to handicap, hey, yeah, I'll overpay what I really can't afford at this much higher interest rate, but it's okay because interest rates will go back down to 2.5%, 3.5% in the next few months. We don't know that.
We have no idea.
So make sure that you're building your housing decision off of what we can control and what we know right now. Hopefully it gets better, but don't always, when you assume, you know what the rest of the story is. It makes out of you and me. So go ahead and make sure you handle that in your scenario planning with your finances too.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about how we get from point A to point B. We've talked about the shelter that we put over our heads. Now let's move on to basic living expenses outside of housing and outside of transportation. Well, when you think about basic living expenses, 2 proxies that we often use are the price of gasoline, how we actually fuel. Well, let me rephrase that. How a lot of us fuel those automobiles, not all of us fuel those automobiles, and then the price of food. Well, it's really, really interesting. When you look at the change of food and gas prices since 2020, since COVID, they're up pretty substantially. I mean, gas has been a wild ride, even as of right now. Even though it's come down from the 2022 highs, it's still up 40% from where it was in 2020. And then food has been on a steady increase. It's actually up 24% over that 3-year time horizon. So just the base level necessities that we have to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis have gotten more expensive. And that's not something that you can control. You won't be able to impact those, but there are things inside of your lexicon that you can control.
I think it's interesting when you look at this because we just gave, over the period of time, 40% for gas and fuel, 24% for food. The volatility, if you actually are seeing this on YouTube, the volatility, especially on gas, because that market is in real time, a little bit of a delay for when it's going on real time to the few weeks to get it to you, pumps to you. But it is legit volatile. So it is interesting how far we have come on this. Food, I think, takes a little longer because the manufacturers and everything, that's a much more developed market with a lot of variables. So it takes a while to actually reach you, the consumer. But needless to say, this is something because we all need, there's a reason we broke out between basic expenses and variable expenses. You don't have control off of needing to feed yourself. So it is one of those things we ought to pay attention to. How do we do a better job of navigating something that's so crucial to us?
So if we can't control the price of gas, what we can control is the type of automobile that we purchase and the type of fuel that is required to do that. If you just look at the cost right now today in July of 2023 of filling up a 15-gallon tank, if you have an automobile that just runs on regular unleaded gasoline, it costs you about $54 to fill up. If you have a diesel automobile, it costs you about $58 to fill up. And if you're driving a luxury brand that requires premium fuel inside the gas tank, it's costing you as much as $65 to fill up right now. So if you're complaining about how much gas is costing you and how inflation has impacted you, but you're driving a premium automobile that requires premium fuel, it's probably a double-edged sword where some of it's inflation, But some of it's your behavior. Some of it's the decisions that you made to buy that type of automobile.
Yeah, I've gone, if you haven't seen it, there's a highlight clip. I went on a rant on my wife's luxury car. And this is one that continues the dividends of buying luxury is that you do have to do this premium fuel. And here's the thing, guys. These things, the newer cars are getting so smart. They can tell if you skip a step on this. And I've even heard case studies where people have said these new luxury vehicles can tell if you don't put the right fuel in them. And manufacturers have the opportunity, if they so choose, to void warranties.
Oh, wow.
So don't even think you have options. Just go ahead. You can control what type of vehicle you are purchasing and go into it knowing insurance is going to cost more. Fuel is going to cost more. These things are not just purchase price decisions. They're also ongoing variables that you will be paying luxury prices and premiums on for years to come.
Okay, so we can't control the price of gas, but we can control the types of automobiles. Or you may be thinking, okay, well, guys, food, I have to eat. I can't. That seems out of my control. If food has become more expensive, then in total, it's going to cost me more to buy food. And while that may be true, part of the problem may not strictly be the increase in the cost of food. There might be more to the story.
Well, kudos to the Money Guy content team. I was so impressed with this one because I was like, did y'all really go do the research on this? And we're like, yep. So our crack team of awesome investigators went out there and said, hey, in this crazy time where we've had inflation, how do you control your food expenses? So we put together a basic list just to highlight the differences on where you buy your groceries. And here's the base. If you have a grocery of gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, 2 pounds of rice, and a dozen eggs.
So basic necessities,
yeah,
right? Like,
but this will give you, even if you expand this, because we could have done anything, but these are basic necessities. Look at the difference, the spread here. We have Aldi, which we know is kind of known for being bare bones to the point that you have to put a quarter in to get a cart. You have to bring your own bags. It is, you are going there for the convenience of good pricing and value. And we found out that it's $8.30. That's pretty impressive.
It's super impressive.
Especially, Bo, I'll let you kind of share the rest of this because you see it goes immediately up 50% for like the neighborhood Publix grocery store.
Yeah, if you go to Publix, which is, I think, considered a slightly premium grocer, for the exact same bucket of goods, you're going to pay $12.30. Maybe Publix is a little more conveniently located. Maybe you like that they have different things there that you buy. Making that choice is going to be a little bit more expensive. But maybe you're someone who says, man, I've got young kids and I'm busy and going to the grocery store just doesn't fit into the normal cadence of my day. And I like Publix, but rather than me shopping there, I'm going to use one of these grocery delivery services. And we just use Instacart because it's one of the brand leaders. Right now, for that exact same basket of goods that you would have paid $12.30 for if you showed up to the store, if you were to use Instacart to buy those same groceries, it's going to cost you $22 for that exact same basket of goods, simply because of the convenience premium for someone else to do the shopping and bringing it to your house.
This is one of those things, guys, where I know the pandemic accelerated a lot of adoptions of virtual meetings, delivery services, working from home. But this is one that I don't completely get. Sure. Maybe this makes me, y'all know I'm Gen X, I'm not a boomer, but when I see these premiums that people are willing, for $8 worth of goods, that's the baseline, people are willing to pay $22 for it for the convenience of having somebody to bring it, it just feels disconnected.
Sure.
I mean, because if we're really struggling, this is, when we all talk about and we pick on people who think they have a problem, but they really don't. We go, man, those are first world problems. You've created this issue. I want you to challenge yourself. If you feel like there's never enough money in the bank that you can't fund your Roth IRA, you can't start the wealth building process, look at this. We all have to buy groceries, but if you're going and using Instacart and conveniences like that, then maybe you need to be very honest with yourself. Because, by the way, it's not even just the convenience services of Instacart. We have a whole nother category over here. And we should have put one more on top of this, but Whole Foods. And I even talked about in the content meeting, I go to Whole Foods only to return my Amazon purchases. I mean, these are the type of things that I need you to be honest, because if I tell you in the same sentence, Your neighbors don't care what car you drive. You know, when people make that big decision, they sure as heck don't care where you buy your bread. So start paying attention to these basics. We've even heard content creators. I think it came up in our content meeting that I think Andy Hill and some other content creators have documented if you just go to a store like Aldi versus going to a Whole Foods, is potentially like a 5-figure annual savings for your household. That's tremendous and something you can do for yourself.
Now, do not mishear us. I think this is an important disclaimer to throw on this. We are not suggesting that you should not shop at Whole Foods. We're not even suggesting that you should not use Instacart. What we are suggesting is if the cost of your life has gotten so expensive that it's crowding out some of the same things that you said you are, and you're blaming that on inflation and simply the cost of goods rising, perhaps you are not being honest that there are some other things, some other levers you could pull. Some people love to shop at Whole Foods because they like the quality of the ingredients, they like the organic, and they like the fill in the blank of whatever that thing is. If you place value on those things, there's nothing wrong with that, but recognize there is a cost associated with it. We just want to make you aware that sometimes we forget to measure all of the cost. And so you need to have an honest assessment about where you are in your financial journey to determine if those decisions are decisions that you intentionally mean to be making.
Well, I don't mind being the old man on the front porch. I think if you can't fund your Roth IRA and you can't reach some of these financial goals, because you either have to make more money, that's an income component, or you have to spend less. That's the only way you can create more cash flow and resources so you can actually build your army of dollars. Make sure you're shaking this tree, because I think if you're not funding your Roth IRA, you need to be very honest that it might be the Instacarts, it might be the Whole Foods. And then if you're doing delivery of Whole Foods through Amazon or however else that they do these premium type things, what are you doing?
Now let's talk about some of the variable living expenses. And this is what I think is really, really interesting. We talked a lot about how with the other aspects, there are things that you can't control and things that you can control. Well, inside of variable living expenses, I'm going to argue you have a lot of control over this one. So while inflation can be present in these areas, a lot of this is personal behavior. So do an accurate self-assessment as we talk through. Say, man, okay, maybe I'm making some decisions that perhaps are not in my best interest.
Yeah, when you think about restaurant prices, I know inflation has impacted this too. And look, you do have control on how often you go to restaurants, but the part that's uncontrollable, the prices are up 23%.
That's right. Since 2020, they're up 23%.
It's gone up 23% over the last few years. That obviously hurts, but I was shocked because, Bo, I don't mind. Once again, I'll just play the bad guy part on this episode. Daniel and the content team, you know, and Daniel and Megan showed me this. I couldn't believe it. I was like, the average American spends $67 a week in food delivery services.
And when you say food, you're talking about like Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash.
But when I see that stat, 60, when I see average person spend 67, I look at myself and I go, this guy ain't doing it. So I know that if people like me aren't doing it and people who are good with money aren't doing it, that means there's a lot of folks out there spending over $100 a week just on food delivery services. What's up?
Let's talk about how significant of an impact this can have on your finances. If you just take the cost of a Chick-fil-A sandwich meal, just a regular, I think that's a #1 Chick-fil-A meal. If you go in store and buy that meal, it's going to cost you $10.09. That's the baseline cost. However, if you use a delivery service like Postmates, you're going to pay a little over $19 for that. If you use Uber Eats, it's going to be $19.50. Grubhub is over $26. And then DoorDash, if you're ordering a #1, I think it's #1. If you're ordering the Chick-fil-A sandwich meal from DoorDash, that $10 meal is going to cost you $29. Again, Brian, I'm going to do this disclaimer because I have a feeling you're about to get mad about this. We are not suggesting you should not use these services.
I am.
We are not collectively suggesting that. But if you are using these services, make sure there's a purpose and a reason behind why you are doing this. You said, you know what? Instead of me driving 30 minutes to Chick-fil-A and sitting in line, I'm going to order this, and that's going to let me work for an additional 30 minutes. Or whatever the case may be, make sure you understand the opportunity cost of the decisions you're making. Because if you're like, oh man, it's just costing me so much to feed my family, but one of the ways you're feeding them are using food delivery services, it's probably not all inflation. It's probably some consumer behavior on your end.
I remember the first time I went to Hollywood. This is back in the mid 2000s, and my wife had this whole list of all these places she wanted to go eat because that's where supposedly celebrities were going to be. And it's paparazzi set up outside of them. And one of them was someplace that had a picket fence in front of it. And I remember, and like I said, this is mid 2000s, the cheeseburger there was $25.
Oof.
And I told my wife, I was like, what are we doing? What? I'm not $25 for a cheeseburger. And then I see there are people, I don't know where they live, but it's not Hollywood.
Sure.
And there's not paparazzi taking pictures of them saying, look cool sitting in this restaurant eating the $25 cheeseburger. This is people delivering to their house a $30 Chick-fil-A sandwich that they could have for a third of the price. What are y'all doing? I mean, this is the part, if you're not funding your Roth IRA, if you're not maxing out your 401k and you're still using these services, you should feel somewhat convicted that I don't even know how these businesses are working. It shows me there's a lot of people that don't understand the value of time. Now, you're saying, I do understand. That's why I'm using. No, because I'm telling you, you have to figure out how you can get as much money invested as early as you can. So at some point you will own your time completely, meaning your money works harder than you do with your back, your hands, and your brain. If you're using services like this to the detriment of your financial future, you don't value time the way you think you do.
But maybe we're not talking about you. Maybe you don't use food delivery services. Maybe that's not something that's come into your purview. However, there is another little silent thing that's going on right now that if you are someone who eats out or you go to coffee shops or you really buy any goods out there in the public, there is a new phenomenon going on that's worth noting because they have gotten very clever and they have gotten very subliminal in how they approach getting more dollars out of your wallet.
We even have a clip, and then I'll save my comments until after this clip.
All right, check this out.
All right, Mr. Johnson, are you ready for your operation? I'm nervous, but I trust you, doctor. You're going to do great. I just need you to answer.
Oh, look at it.
Is that a joke? I'm just going to be cutting you open and saving your life. I hope it goes well.
This is the thing I think is interesting, Bo. We haven't gotten to the point where your accountant is asking for tips or your doctor's asking for tips. But I will tell you, and I don't know, I hate to pick on all my West Coast people, but isn't Shake Shack a West Coast
I think we have some here, but I think so.
Yeah, I know. I've been to the Shake Shack here. And I remember I went to the Shake Shack and I ordered at a kiosk. And then after I ordered my food, didn't talk to a person. I just ordered at this kiosk. It had the whole thing. And the default, I think, was like 20%.
That was what they defaulted the tip.
Defaulted tip. And I was like, what? Because I was like, okay, well, it may be, because here's the way my brain works. And y'all can put in the comments, you can blast me for being cheap on this. But if it's a counter service meal, but they bust the table, I think it's worth 10%.
Okay.
Because it's a fast, casual restaurants. A lot of them are counter service. But if they bust your table for you, meaning after you finish your meal, you get up and walk away, I'm going to tip you 10%. Okay. So when they have a 20% default, and you have to, it blows my mind. But it wasn't even that, by the way, because I can't even remember how much I tipped, but I fell prey to it. And then I sit down, and I thought they'd bring me the food. Because, fast casual, a lot of times they'll bring you the food. Nope. They call your number out. You walk up to the counter. You pick up your food. And then you sit down. You eat your food. All the condiments are over here. I ate my food. And then after you eat your food, you have to get up and go take your trash over to the thing. I was like, what the heck did I tip for? And this is the culture that we're in. And I only thing I disagree is we put this in the things you control versus you don't control. The uncontrollable part is that everybody's trying to get in your back pocket with this tip culture. I think that at some point you have to be prepared, and I've kind of reached that point now, is that I'm not going to just tip people 20 to 25% on the natural now. Now, look, I am very generous. Anybody who's ever waited on me, and if you have, you can put it down in the comments. I'm very generous. But I am, if it's going to be counter service and other things like that, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing my part of not letting this thing get out of hand, because I do feel like it's gotten out of hand.
So there's a unique social contract that exists that when someone says, hey, I just want to ask you a quick question, they flip it over, we naturally, something in our brain makes us think, oh, well, I have to respond in kind. I have to select. And a lot of times they will default, like you said, to 20-25%. We are not suggesting that tipping is bad. We are not suggesting that you should not tip. By all means, you should be generous with your dollars if that's a goal that you have. However, don't fall prey to the mental tricks of, hey, I want to ask you a question, to flip it over, there's a tip button, simply for the sake of more money flowing out of your back pocket. Be intentional with your dollars. Make sure if you're leaving a tip, if you are paying someone for a service they provide, you know why you're doing what you're doing. Don't just default. Because I think, interestingly enough, if you were to do a study, go look at all the default tips that would have been left if you don't advocate for yourself, you'd be shocked at how much it will add up to. All we're saying is that be intentional, be purposeful, understand where your dollars are going. That's something that's inside of your control.
Yeah, I would just educate yourself. Once again, an ounce of preparation is going to pay tremendous dividends. Nothing wrong with tipping. I don't want that to be what comes out. I want you to tip what is appropriate and what you're supposed to, not because they're playing crazy psychological tricks on you by flipping over the screen and putting 25% as the default on something that maybe should be 10%, or in Shake Shack's situation, 0%, because I did all the work. I mean, I was one step, from me flipping the burger in the place. I haven't gone back, by the way.
If I went to Shake Shack and saw you flipping a burger, I would tip you if you flipped
It was not the greatest experience, but maybe all my West Coast people. By the way, I looked around the restaurant. It was all, because half of our neighborhood is California, Chicago, and I think they just crave the homeland of California, and that's how this place is staying in business.
All right, so we've talked about some variable expenses. Let's talk about another one that's really, really interesting. Gym memberships. We all want to be healthy. We all want to focus on fitness, but it's interesting. Gym memberships have increased by 14% from January of 2019 to August of 2022. So that is an inflationary pressure. Gyms have become more expensive. That's not something that is necessarily in your control. However, what is in your control is the type of gym you choose to go to and the type of gym you choose to pay a membership to, and whether you show up to gym. I've talked to a bunch of gym owners in the past that say, hey, the best kind of member, the one that never shows up and has their account on auto pay. That's how they make their money, is by you not showing up, not wearing out their equipment, and just having it auto pay. So if you look at some of the different prices of gym availability, it's pretty stark. It's pretty intense when you look at the different costs.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. We actually looked at monthly prices of gym memberships and like Lifetime Fitness, which was more of like a country club, because there's one actually in our community. It's for two adults to go to Lifetime Fitness. It's around $319 a month.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
If you think about 88 times over, $1 can turn into 88. Well, $319 for most folks can turn into a lot of money by the time you get to 65.
Meanwhile, now back in Georgia, this was in our community. I don't think we have one of these around here, but a Planet Fitness is $28 a month commitment. Completely different. I think they're going quantity of people, not counting on many people to show up to have that type of pricing, whereas Lifetime, like I said, is more of that country club. But then we put a third option on here. Now, Bo, obviously, you can look at him and say, which of us works out, which of us does not do as much? And you can see Bo and a few others on the content team put in, hey, why not share that there are options where you can have zero monthly costs with your own home gym or going to the apartment gym? Give a little more detail on that.
So obviously there are startup costs, right? Like if you're going to do a home gym, you have to buy the equipment. But even with like a Planet Fitness, I think their initial sign-up fee is something like $100. I think Lifetime is something like $200. Even if you weren't to take those and you went and bought yourself a jump rope, or you bought yourself some dumbbells, or you bought yourself Pilates ball, I don't know, whatever your fitness of choice is, it's amazing that once you have that initial upfront cost, if you just go download a free app that'll do a workout for you, you can do it in your garage, you can do it in your living room, or if you're a renter and you're in an apartment complex, oftentimes there are amenities that are free and available there for you to use. So make sure, if you're going to spend money on this, if you're going to pay for the fancy gym membership, the fitness will not increase and the pounds will not melt off if you're not showing up. So don't pay for something you're not utilizing. Now, again, Disclaimer, we're not suggesting you should not have a lifetime fitness membership. We're suggesting that if you're going to do that, make sure you understand why you're doing it, you take advantage of it, and you're not neglecting other areas of your finance in order to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, be purposeful with every dollar that comes your way. One thing that came up, I wish I'd have thought of this while we were doing content prep. All the people that bought Peloton bikes during the pandemic. Does anybody know? Because I bought a very nice vacuum cleaner that, people, these things are outrageously priced. I was like, there's no way in Hades that I am paying that much for a vacuum cleaner. But my wife wanted this thing because it was going to clean up the air that we breathe and so forth. So I bought it used. And I bought it for 30% of what this thing cost new. And it was only like a year old. So I'm wondering, does anybody know? Maybe you can share it in the comments section. Peloton bikes. If I bought a used one,
there's an aftermarket for it, is what you're asking.
Can I still get all the benefits of the brand new people? Because that seems like that would be a ripe opportunity to grab lots of value. Because I bet there's a lot of people during the pandemic that grabbed those bikes and exercise equipment because they thought they were going to work from home. But human nature is most people who do that stuff aren't. A lot of them, by the way, Peloton does market off. People do have a stick with it. But I'm counting on there's enough people that have failed that I might be able to find an arbitrage situation.
So if you want to sell Brian your bike, go ahead and reach out to us.
I'd love to know. Is that something, or have they created some incentives where it makes it where you can't do it? I really am curious. Maybe somebody can hook us up on that because I might be in the market.
All right, let's talk about another one. And this one is really interesting. Subscriptions. We've all know that a lot of us have cut the cord over the past number of years.
Mistake for most of us now in retrospect.
As a means to save money, and yet the price of subscription services has increased. If you look from 2020, from COVID until now, inflation is up about 17%. Well, the price for an Amazon Prime membership has increased 17%. YouTube TV has increased 46%. Disney Plus has increased 57%. Netflix, assuming that you're doing the premium plan with 4 users in separate households, has gone up 175%. So while you cannot control how much those subscription services increase, what you can control is the ones that you utilize. Do I actually need 6 different subscriptions? Am I actually using all of them? Or is there a chance I could even cut down on my number of subscriptions, have more dollars stay in my back pocket to ultimately build up my army of dollar bills?
Yeah, this is one. I mean, I remember I've even done content that maybe at some point I'll probably get so embarrassed we'll take it down. But, on all the cost savings from cutting the cord, man, do I feel like I got played like a sucker. So seriously, you think about the fish traps or whatever where they have a big entrance, but then it gets smaller and smaller because you lure them in and they can't get back out. That's exactly what all these providers have done, is that they've lured us away from the package deals out to these individual things. And look, we've created a mess, and they've created a mess for themselves too. That nobody can figure out how to make money off of this. So who knows where it's going to land, but I will tell you what you ought to do. Be proactive. Once again, a little bit of research is going to save you a ton of money. Figure out which of the subscription services you actually use. Is there the ability to play them by the time? Like if they have a series that you want to watch, can you just subscribe during that period of, for a few months and then drop out? There's all kind of ways to play this so that you're not that trapped salmon waiting, got in the fish trap and can't figure out how to get out. This is something you can be proactive and save yourself from the wasted monthly subscription expenses.
Here's the deal. Inflation stinks. It makes all of our lives more expensive. And unfortunately, it's going to happen whether we want it to or not. It is something that is outside of our control. However, what is in our control is how we make decisions around the things that we spend our money on. Hopefully, some of the items we covered today will have uncovered something for us. Say, hey, you know what? That's right. I don't use that gym membership, or I don't need those subscriptions, or maybe I'm not driving the right kind of automobile, whatever that thing may be, because every little dollar that you can save, every bit of margin that you can add to your financial life, compounded through time, can be incredibly impactful. Even when things get hard, even when prices go up, you can be an advocate for your wallet if you're willing to do a little bit of extra research, a little bit of extra diligence to make the tough decisions.
Yeah, I would encourage, because today was one of those incremental decision behavior type shows. We didn't go deep into like calculations and other things. There's really more of what you can focus on from an incremental decision A versus decision B to make good small decisions that lead to big opportunities in the long term. If you're on that journey, I want to invite you to be a part of the abundance cycle. When I talk about that, it's the learn, apply, grow. If we want to get you within our system of understanding all of our free resources, go to moneyguy.com/resources. You can download all kind of things. We talked about housing, we talked about vehicles, but I get more excited about the financial order of operations, the money multiplier. There's all kind of investment things there that you can use to get you motivated to go forward. And then don't forget about, if you want to accelerate your path, go to learn.moneyguy.com, and we have our courses, the net worth tracker tool. We also have the know your number, so you can know if you're ahead of the curve, behind the curve, or right on the curve. And of course, we have the financial order of operations course. And all that leads to the graduation point of the abundance cycle, where you can take the relationship to the next level. Because hopefully, as you get to be a 7-figure CEO, you're going to say, hey, I need a CFO so I don't screw up my one retirement. I need somebody who's done this many, many times. You'll think of us. I love creating this content. Bo loves creating this content. All of the content team does. Be an active participant in your future. Remember, own your financial future, or it will own you. Money Guy team, out.